Right now, do we know why these new regulations were put in place?
There were certain moves afoot from behind the scenes to, as we say, to regulate complementary medicines as a standalone division of what is indeed a medicine. The reason for that is because there's so many different modalities. One can talk of, as I said in the beginning, homeopathy, nutritional supplementation, on a broader spectrum. Sports nutrition could form part of it, vitamins, minerals, herbs, traditional medicines, etc. To lump all of that together within the ambit of what is a medicine and to define them all by means of one criteria is somewhat limiting, and you're not necessarily treating everything as it ought to be in context. So regulation should take place. The way that this was done, however, they seem to have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And there's a place for complementary medicines in everyone, in society. And the industry has been growing rapidly over the last 20 years, but it just needs to be seen as being regulated responsibly, as opposed to either, on the one hand, not being regulated at all, versus over-regulation, which will have the effect of killing the industry.
I know there's a court case in regards to all of this. What's that court case about?
So the Health Products Association has taken the Department of Health to court, and it's in respect of these very self-same regulations, part of which, the majority of which pertains to this definition, that ambit is too limiting. The requirements placed on a complementary medicines manufacturer are also incredibly onerous. For instance, there would be labeling requirements. The labeling would have to be in 2 official South African languages, which seems absolutely above board and fair and legitimate in isolation. However, now we're talking about a complementary medicines bottle, which is, so if you could see my hand, so big. It's jam-packed full of writing as it is, and the text is quite small. In order to make that same label in 2 different languages with technical terminology, which, for example, if we had to take a traditional African language, we're using some Latin terms, there may not be a translation in that traditional African language for these Latin terms. We're dealing with a very imperfect system, and there were no practical guidelines in terms of how that ought to be implemented. The timelines also weren't realistic in terms of the implementation and putting into effect of some of these regulations. And furthermore, when it was put to the Medicines Control Council to say, but if indeed we follow this according to the letter of the law and we are rendered to be call it a category A or a scheduled medicine, what are the implications of that? One of the implications would be that there ought to be clinical trials. And clinical trials is a subject matter on its own. Number one, it's an incredibly expensive process. Number two, it's when you're dealing with a complementary medicine, it's something that occurs naturally by and large in nature. We're talking about, for example, the best example would be an omega-3 fatty acid derived from fish, or vitamin C derived from citrus fruit. We did not invent these substances, so therefore we can't patent them. So if we go do a clinical trial at a cost of 10 million rand, 15 million rand, and we publish the results, and we are now able to show that the vitamin C in this given product is exactly 1,000 milligrams or 500 milligrams, whatever the case may be. It is proven to be clinically safe at these doses, etc., with this method of absorption. That's excellent, and nothing stops the competitor in the very next shop next door from making his own brand of vitamin C with the exact same formulation, using the exact same clinical data, because it also applies to him, and we can't protect that. Whereas if you contrast that with a scheduled medicine, I invent that scheduled medicine, I patent it, I can then go do my clinical trials, and no one else can use that because it belongs to me. It's my proprietary information from an intellectual property perspective. So the investment that I use for the clinical trials is protected. Also, we're talking about, on scheduled drugs, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars worth of income generated from these, as opposed to a fractional amounts in terms of complementary medicine. Why? Because everyone can make them. It's not unique. You don't have one brand making vitamin C, and if you want vitamin C, you can only buy from that brand, which is what the case is generally on patented medication.